Welcome everyone, this is Andre's Restart, and today we are talking about a possible Nintendo leaker that has just been taken down. Now, I say possible because this may be someone who's legitimately leaking things that are going to happen later down the road for both Nintendo and Sega. But also it's very much possible, if not even more likely, that this person is not leaking anything at all. And so you should be taking it with a grain of salt. But the reason we are talking about Zippo, that's the name of the leaker today, is because even though they've had a past where a lot of things have been said and not a lot of it has come true, their blog, where they've been making a lot of posts lately, a lot of which that do make sense, has been taken down, and this is leading many to believe that Zippo was indeed a legitimate leaker. So is this really the case? Does this mean a lot of the things that they've been saying throughout December are legitimate? Well, that's what we're talking about today. But before going forward, let me point out that we are aiming to reach 50,000 subscribers, so if you do enjoy my content, please subscribe and hit the notification bell. Leaving a like is also super helpful, and enjoy the ride as we talk about Nintendo every day. So if you go to Zippo's blog, this is what it says. Blog has been removed. Sorry, the blog at zippospeaks.blogspot.com has been removed. This address is not available for new blogs. So this might be the end for Zippo. So for those that hate hearing about Zippo, you may not be able to hear about them ever again. Of course, if we never hear about them ever again, then that may indeed suggest that this removal had something to do with Nintendo or Sega getting their blog removed, which would then mean that maybe they shouldn't have been so infamous and that we should have been taking them more seriously all this time. But that's kind of hard to prove if it's actually been removed or not. If Zippo does come back at some point in some way, shape, or form, then I would start to think this is more of a publicity stunt, so I'm definitely taking this with a grain of salt. It may not be the case that Zippo's blog has been removed because he's a legitimate leaker. But something else I would like to say here, and I want to tread lightly on this one because this may be a bit sensitive, it's possible they took down their blog for personal reasons. Maybe there's something going on in their life and they just don't want to be a part of this anymore. Maybe they've got too much hate and that negativity, that toxicity really got to them. And so if that's the case, this is a person at the end of the day, and I hope that it's nothing sad or personal like that. In terms of this being true or not, it is hard to say. From an angle, I'm kind of hoping that we don't hear from Zippo again, not because I want them to be gone necessarily, but because if they do come back, I think it would imply that it would be indeed some sort of publicity stunt to get more attention for when they do come back. If they don't come back, it would suggest that a lot of things they've talked about on their blog might be true. And so what are some of the things that they've talked about recently that could be happening? Well, because they took down their blog, you can no longer look at their posts. However, if it's been screen capped in the past, then sure. Now, I don't pay attention to Zippo religiously, so I don't have all the receipts here, but there is a channel that has most if not all of them, and that is around the clock. So I'll be linking their channel in the description below. Whenever Zippo has made posts, they've made videos about them. But I have seen most of Zippo's posts, so I do have an idea of what he's been talking about. The most recent post was about a remake of Xenoblade Chronicles X. Now, a remake of Xenoblade Chronicles X for Nintendo's next generation console, I would love to see that, but I am somewhat skeptical that Nintendo would remake Xenoblade Chronicles X when it's still a fairly modern game that could be more easily remastered to look pretty impressive. Now, the story is that this would be for Nintendo's next generation console, so maybe they want to do a more sizable jump here, which might be why it's being called the remake. But also maybe this is a scenario where the sort of terminology remake versus remaster gets a little bit blurry, and it's not quite understood what this game is. Because I think even if it ends up being a Switch 2 exclusive, a remaster still is probably what it would be. They would still probably use the source code, the base of the initial Xenoblade Chronicles X release on Wii U, which would make it a remaster even if it looks vastly better with new content, which by the way, I would expect for Xenoblade Chronicles X, regardless if it's just on Switch 2, if it's on Switch 1, or both. But I am somewhat skeptical about this being a Switch 2 exclusive, because this is an ideal game to put on Nintendo Switch. It's the kind of game that I could see really helping to bridge the gap between Switch and Switch 2 as we see these last few years of Switch. Very much the same way Nintendo had a lot of remakes and remasters and enhanced ports or demakes on the 3DS in those last few years while the Switch came out and it started to pick up some momentum. So this being a Switch 2 exclusive is a bit of a head scratcher to me. But do I think Xenoblade Chronicles X is coming in some capacity in the next couple years? I think there's a really darn good chance, yes. Now, they've also talked about other things, like a Knights game coming from Sega, which is interesting because Sega recently has announced this initiative to bring a whole bunch of next-generation Sega games based off a lot of their older IP, and we saw a lot of them announced during the Game Awards. So could there be more? Could this include Knights? Perhaps. They've also been talking about another 3D Sonic coming out next year, which also wouldn't come as much of a shock because we see Sonic pretty much every single year, so this does seem conceivable to me as well. They've also discussed the Switch 2 coming out next year, which we've talked about a lot. I do think Switch 2 is coming out next year. There's a lot of reports for that, so it is conceivable to me. Shortly before the Game Awards, Zippo put out a blog post discussing Smash anniversary plans, and there was a great deal of speculation put in there, so it's unclear what they actually heard outside of Smash anniversary plans, but on December 7th, Nintendo did announce anniversary plans for Smash Ultimate, although most of the discussion that came from Zippo's post was about Smash anniversary plans centered around the original early next year. They've also talked about 3D Mario, and it being amazing, and it coming out with Nintendo's next generation console, things that other people have said. They've also talked about a Mario Sports title, I believe. I will say that Camelot, the developer that's responsible for the Mario Sports titles, came out with Mario Golf Super Rush back in 2021, and then 3 years prior, Mario Tennis Aces in 2018. So there seems like there's a 3-year gap between their Mario Sports titles, and 2024 would be the next time if this pattern were to continue. So I do think there's a good chance a Mario Sports title will be coming out in 2024. And another thing that they sort of seemed to piggyback on was Ocarina of Time. They said that the Hero of Time will be making a comeback, which supports my theory that Ocarina of Time will be getting a remake within the next couple years. It is a theory, and I guess it's also a rumor because Zippo has talked about it, and there does seem to be a lot of discussion on this topic. It seems like something that's resonating with a lot of people. And I've made several videos on this Ocarina of Time remake already, making the argument for why it does make sense, why I think it's happening. And none of it's had to do with the Zippo rumor, but Zippo did put it in there before being taken down. And actually, one other thing I'll mention here that's fairly relevant is Mario Kart. They've talked about Mario Kart Cross, Mario Kart 10, and they've talked about how it's probably coming out in 2025, which has been my prediction with the DLC having just ended, Nintendo's next generation on the way, and them likely wanting Mario Kart available on the system as early as possible. I think sometime in 2025 makes a lot of sense. While I do think Switch 2 is probably coming out in 2024, it will not be out for the entire calendar year, and I also think we're not far removed enough from the Booster Course Pass of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe to move on to next generation Mario Kart. But a little bit over a year later, 2025, once the Switch 2 has been out for at least a few months, then I think would be the ideal time for this next generation Mario Kart to be coming out. So that's just something else to keep in mind moving forward now that Zippo is seemingly gone for good. So if we do get a 3D Sonic game, if there is a Knights game from Sega that does come out, if Xenoblade Chronicles X is a Switch 2 exclusive and it's been remade, or if they do call the next Mario Kart 10 and it comes out 2025, or there's a Mario Sports title next year, while a lot of these things I would say are pretty solid predictions, if all of them come true or most of them come true, then I would think, oh, you know what, maybe Zippo did have some inside information. Earlier this year, they did talk about a Mario Wonder Direct and even got the timing right for it. So it was that moment where I started to pay more attention to them this year, but nothing else has come true yet, at least in terms of a lot of their recent posts. So let's see what happens, but wherever Zippo is, I hope that they're okay. Anyways, everyone, what do you make of this situation? Do you think Zippo was legitimate and that's why they were taken down? Was this a publicity stunt? Or was this just taken down for personal reasons? I'm curious to see what you guys have to say in the comments below. This is Andres Restart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care.